Hello, everyone. This is Priyanka Kishore from Asia Decoded. Welcome and thank you for listening to our podcast on Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto's first 100 days in office. Mr. Subianto became Indonesia's eighth president on October 20th, 2024, with the promise to lift the country's economic growth from 5% to 8% over the medium term. His term so far has been anything but uneventful, from retaining Sri Mulyani Indrawati as the finance minister to banning sales of the iPhone 16 in Indonesia and signaling a shift in foreign policy with BRICS membership. The president has kept investors and markets on the edge. We are delighted to be joined today by Richard Borsuk, who will help us delve deeper into these developments and offer insights into Indonesia's likely policy direction under President Prabowo. Richard has worked as a reporter and editor in Asia for 50 years. He was the Wall Street Journal's Indonesia correspondent from 1987 through 1998 and is currently an adjunct senior fellow at Singapore's S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Nanyang Technological University. He is also the co-author with Nancy Chung of Lim Sio Leong's Salim Group, The Business Pillar of Suharto's Indonesia, a critically acclaimed book on Indonesian business and political history. Richard, thanks so much for joining us today. Let's dive right into the focus of this podcast. You have been quite skeptical of President Prabowo's campaign promises. What is your assessment of his first 100 days in office?
I think a lot of people, while they'll keep an open mind, have just been struck, can't help getting past how many promises have been made or goals have been set by Prabowo. Way back in the long Suharto period, his government our administration was known as the New Order. In the case of Prabowo, I think it's fair to call it the Tall Order because of how much he's put out there, including the 8% growth, the GDP growth target you mentioned, wanting to build 3 million housing units a year, eventually providing nutritious food for more than 80 million young school children and pregnant women. He has also said that he thinks Indonesia can get off coal, which is pivotal to the economy, within 15 years, which would really be astonishing. So the skepticism is the sheer number and ambitious nature of the goals he has set.
It's a tall order. You couldn't have put that better. Coming back to the meal program, in our conversations, you have raised several valid doubts about the implementation and success of the program. Can you please elaborate on this for our listeners?
Sure. There's understandably been a great deal of focus on the cost of the program. Another concern, and let's recognize that this is an admirable idea. If it can be pulled off, it will be a big contribution to Indonesia. But there are practical issues, logistical. This is a massive, massive logistical undertaking, particularly outside of the island of Java, where you don't have the infrastructure that you have. And also, if milk is going to be a core part of it, and I think it probably will, Indonesia does not produce enough milk now to handle the program and the natural market. So there are plans to bring in millions of cows over a period of years. Again, this may be doable, be impressive as heck if it is, but it's going to test the logistical capabilities of the Indonesian government. Also, there's going to be some concern, particularly away from Jakarta and Java. When government is spending a lot of money, will somebody potentially be skimming some of that money? Again, it's a great idea, but it's going to be testing from a practicality point of view.
Shifting a bit from domestic to foreign policy, much has been made of the video of President Prabowo congratulating US President elect Mr. Trump with a copy of the China Daily in the background. In your view, do the first 100 days provide any insights into Indonesia's geopolitical leanings, especially between the US and China?
Right. Well, I don't take that China Daily thing seriously. Frankly, I don't think many people will realize it's a copy of China Daily, and I don't think there was any conspiracy to put it there while he's talking with Donald Trump. There's no question about one thing, all the speculation that President Prabowo wants to be or will be, in effect, his own foreign minister. This is all coming into place, already come into place, with the news that Indonesia is now a full member of the BRICS, which is something Jokowi wanted to shy away from. There's nothing shy about President Prabowo, who did cause a bit of storm when he was in China about wording of an MOU in the South China Sea or the North Natuna Sea for the Indonesian part. Prabowo definitely will make strenuous efforts to stay on good terms with China, also be on good terms with the U.S. He was hoping to meet Trump while in the U.S. You can see that from the phone call. That wasn't going to quite happen, but he did have that interesting conversation, and he heard Donald Trump tell him he's doing a great job.
Yes, clearly there is a shift, and thanks. That's a great summary of insights from the first 100 days. I really want to take this opportunity to actually talk about your book as well. Nancy, and your book on the Salim Group is the second most recommended in the Economist list of 6 books to read on Indonesia. And what intrigues me is that do you see any parallels between Suharto's Indonesia that worked closely with oligarchs like the Salim Group and present Indonesia? Are economic gains still largely limited to elites, and especially now because the president himself is from an elite background?
Right, thanks. Indonesia is quite a lot different today from the Suharto period, but to me, there's still quite a bit of the old Indonesia in today's Indonesia. You have institutional weaknesses, you have real problems with a judicial system that lacks credibility. You have, a political situation that is definitely different. Elite is still basically on top and going to remain on top. It strikes me that the elite will get most of the gains still. There is one piece of good news. I think that in Suharto's day, there was a reason to call it Suharto's Indonesia. He basically ran everything, and people had to deal with him or pitch to him. In post-Suharto Indonesia, although there have been a couple stronger presidents and weaker presidents, no president has as much power across the board as Suharto had. And the business community is more multipolar, whereas in the Suharto period, or much of the Suharto period, just a couple conglomerates were on top, basically, and got the bulk of projects in some areas.
Now, also, you had a front row seat to the Asian financial crisis in Jakarta. The economic fallout of the crisis is widely documented, but what struck me is that your book goes beyond that to vividly describe the civil unrest that ensued and the human impact. Clearly, Indonesia would want to avoid a repeat of such turmoil, but do you think the guardrails established to strengthen the economy and improve resilience to external shocks in the aftermath of the crisis, such as the 3% fiscal deficit ceiling, are now at risk due to President Prabowo's ambitious spending plans that some of them you alluded to earlier?
Right. That covers quite a lot of ground. The guardrail, or the main guardrail today, is the finance minister. And markets were understandably happy, quite relieved when they found out Sri Mulyani would be staying on. I wouldn't be too sure about how long she's going to stay on in the new configuration, but she's there, and many people feel relieved for it. I think the 3% ceiling on the fiscal deficit has been real important for economic stability, and hopefully will stay in place. It's only really been broken when it had to be for the COVID period, which Indonesia handled very well in the end. 1998, obviously a pivotal year. It kind of all happened in that year. The economy shrank 13% that year, and that disastrous result doesn't even reflect damage that was done to nutrition, for instance, for young children. People didn't go to schools, or the schools had no resources. Indonesia was in a heck of a mess, 98. So let's compare where we are now with 98. There's been a lot of things to feel good about, although people are frustrated that growth in recent years has been stuck at 5%. It's still growth, and poverty levels have declined somewhat. Again, the new government, the new president is right to focus on building up, giving good nutrition to kids who historically haven't had it. And this will help over decades to give you a skill level you don't have in your human capital.
That actually sets us up very nicely for our next question. I wanted to ask you about your views on Indonesia's economic potential. I also wanted to touch on, the nationalistic interventions that have been a part of Indonesia's economic strategy. Do you think these are consistent with its growth ambitions, whether it be, the 8% growth or self-sufficiency in energy and food that you have mentioned often in our conversations?
Well, on potential, there's an old cliche, which is to kind of fill in the blank, not just for Indonesia, but an old cliche saying Indonesia is a country with great potential and always will be. They haven't developed as well as a lot of people think they should have, given the resource base that you have. In a sense, sometimes the resource base is a kind of curse, that you have good income from oil, so you don't have to be innovative and entrepreneurial. Also in Indonesia, sometimes entrepreneurship involves how do you get to be the monopoly license to import something, instead of how do you make a new product. By the way, so far I didn't mention manufacturing. The manufacturing sector is not in a good way. It's been shrinking, and that's contributed to a shrinking of the middle class. So these are areas that have to get a lot of attention. But back to development strategies, Indonesia needs more foreign investment. Not everyone will agree, for sure. There are quite a few Indonesians, hearkening back to the Dutch colonial period, who think Indonesia needs less foreign investment, not more foreign investment. But in this competitive world, which is obviously getting choppier economically, you need to have a good inflow of capital. So, but because of the colonial experience, nationalist sentiments are very strong in Indonesia. It's no surprise they have and regularly refer to these local content rules that make a problem for people like Apple, not allowed to sell its latest iPhone in Indonesia. But from the Indonesian point of view, you want access to our big and promising market. You need to make investments that go into the product that you're selling, investments in Indonesia.
So the future holds a lot of potential, but you have also reminded us, Richard, that we need to see more implementation and action rather than just goals.
Priyanka, if I can just add something, basically what Indonesia needs, what Prabowo needs, is to move from the signing of MOUs to actually getting business added or done. There's an awful lot of MOUs that don't really pan out historically.
Completely agree, Richard. Thank you for the fantastic conversation and for unpacking the complexities of Indonesia's economic and policy landscape for us. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Do check out Asia Decoded's Substack for more insights into Indonesia's evolving policies and their economic implications.